What's the scariest thing you've woken up to in the middle of the night? I woke up to sound of scampering raccoon-like creature inside my room zooming about the night before Christmas. It then bounced on my bed, jumped off and ran out. Raccoon sized. I followed it and it was laying on the couch and barked at me adorably. Apparently my parents got my sister a puppy and it had escaped during the night because it was lonely. They had it in an uncovered puppy kennel in the living room and he climbed out. The interesting thing is he didn't like my older sister and instead clung to me, and he became my dog when she moved out and couldn't take him. Best friend to this day. Possibly the best story outcome here. Went to bed at midnight. Woke up in searing pain at 2 AM. Such grave pain that I thought my appendix had burst. Flipped on the lights to take a Tylenol only to find I had rolled over on a black widow spider that had bit me. My son has had a scout since he was born. It's this green dog that plays music and speaks when you press his paw, and you can program it to say your child's name. He also speaks in a young child's voice. Since my son was an infant at the time, all his toys were pretty much contained to our living room as he wasn't crawling yet. Every night before we went to bed, we would put his toys away in a wicker basket that we had beside our entertainment system. I distinctly remember putting Scout back in the basket. I woke up at 2 in the morning to Scout's voice under my bed, saying, "Do you want to play?" Son's name? I was halfway to my son's room to get him and get the frick away from that haunted butt toy before my brain turned on and I realized that my cat had dragged Scout under our bed and was currently humping the crap out of it. Freaking Cass, man. My dinkus neighbor was drunk and thought my apartment was his. He broke the lock on my door. He then opened up the door to my bedroom and scared the crap out of me at 1 AM. I screamed and he apologized profusely and asked if I wanted to drink Modelo with him and his wife at their house. There had been a baptism so everyone was partying it up across the way. I went because they're nice, and they had tamales. My freaking friend standing over me in the middle of the night while sleeping at his place. Mother scared the life out of me. I'm sure there were worse things. But one time when I was a kid, my parents placed a full body shaped Elmo balloon in my room while I was sleeping. Ever woken up to a floating body? Same thing happened to me when I was asleep, except the balloon was dying and the central air herded it downstairs. It was a big smiley balloon and it woke me up when the string slithered across my face. I have yet to ever be that petrified in my life. Sleeping at home, alone. I woke up one night when I rolled over and someone else's limp arm flopped across my chest. I freaked out, grabbed the arm, flung it away, and tried to scramble out of bed before realizing that it was my own arm. It had completely lost all feeling up to the shoulder. I woke up at 1 AM to a hand touching my boob. Next thing I know, I'm flailing about in an attempt to stop the would-be assaulter, only to realize that my arm was numb. I also managed to knock over everything in arm's reach and slap myself in the face. Daughter had this Minnie Mouse baby doll that crawled on all fours when you touched a button on its back. Wife and I woke up at 2 AM to the sound of the doll's creepy laugh. Went out to the living room and the doll was walking straight into the corner. Each time it stopped it would just start right over again. The button wasn't broken or anything, so I'm not sure what happened. Donated it. Buried would have been more appropriate. Someone standing in the bedroom doorway. He flipped on the light then flipped it off. I woke my husband up and this guy walked out of the apartment. My husband ran out after him in his underwear. I went to the kitchen and got a knife and ran after my husband. Turns out, the woman who lived there before us had broken up with her boyfriend and moved without telling him or getting back his key. I guess he came back to see her at 3 in the morning. I used to live a few minutes away from Buncefield Oil Storage Facility. It was the 5th largest oil depot in the UK. On the morning of the 11th of December 2005 it exploded. The explosion threw me out of my bed, and the doors of our house burst open. I looked outside my bedroom window and the sky was engulfed by a giant fireball. 11-year-old me genuinely thought it was the end of the world. It still baffles me as to how no one died during that incident. Dang. I'd have nightmares about that for years. I got up to go to the bathroom and didn't turn my bedroom light on, so I didn't see that anything was amiss. When I got to the toilet, I suddenly realized that my hands were covered in blood up to my elbows. It wasn't dripping wet but it wasn't dry either. I didn't have any cuts or seem to have any injury of any kind. When I washed my hands I checked everywhere. No injury. What the heck was happening? When I went back to my bedroom I turned the light on, and half of my pillow was covered in blood as well. Almost exactly down the middle. It was then that I realized I'd gotten a nosebleed and been wiping at it in my sleep, and it must have stopped just before I woke up, so I didn't have any clue left on my body as to where I'd bled from. I was living in a very dry area at the time, so nosebleeds were a common issue for me. That's the only time I've gotten one during my sleep though. Open up. Police. We have a search warrant. It was about 6 AM, accompanied by banging that was loud as crap. Turns out it was for the apartment beneath my bedroom window, but I sat straight up and my first thought was, oh no, they got me despite being one of the least shady people alive. They heard about you rebroadcasting NFL games to your friends with only implied written consent of the NFL. Oh, they'll be coming for you next. Exploding head syndrome, alternately termed episodic cranial sensory shock, is a benign condition in which a person experiences unreal noises that are loud and short, like a bomb exploding or a gunshot, when falling asleep or waking up. These noises are often jarring and frightening for the person. Neither the cause nor the mechanism is known, though harmless in and of themselves. Episodes have been known to create distress or impairment in the lives of individuals. It happens to me once or twice a year. It keeps things interesting. Housemate coming home drunk after midnight from a Halloween party dressed as Jason from Friday 13th. Walked into my room by mistake in his full Voorhees costume and just stood in the middle of the room looking around trying to work out where he was. Woke me up as my door opened and I was frozen terrified for a good 30 seconds. Bought a lock for my door the following week. I lived my oldest sister and her 2 daughters. Her youngest, 3 years old, was a sleepwalker. She was tiny, white blonde and liked to wear a white nightgown that was too big for her. Yeah, wake up to the sound of thumb sucking right next to my head, roll over and see the world's shortest ghost. We had a rooster who was pretty aggressive, but he watched the rest of the chickens. He was so aggressive though that only certain people could go near him, otherwise he'd attack and spur. For a while he had free reign of our yard, but we had to pin him because he'd attack people. Well, he'd figured out he could sort of halfway fly out and get back into our yard after we'd all gone to sleep. One night we woke up to what sounded like a young girl screaming at the top of their lungs. We ran outside to see what it was and old Bark, his name, was walking around decapitated. He'd picked a fight with a raccoon and lost, but that sound he made that night still haunts my dreams sometimes. Someone slamming on the door of the apartment across the hall screaming your apartment is on fire. It sounded like it was on mine. Woke up and immediately started choking on smoke. The fire alarm then went off. Everything ended up being okay. Someone flicked a cigarette butt off their balcony. It landed on the one a few floors beneath it and set their patio furniture on fire. Hence why someone saw it before the alarm went off. It was just so disorienting and terrifying to wake up to the pounding on the door, the screaming, and the smoke. In late, but well, one night I swore I heard a man's voice downstairs. I slowly crept downstairs, found nothing, and went to bed. Next night, again, I swore I heard a man's voice downstairs. Again I crept downstairs and again found nothing. Third night, this time I heard a woman's voice downstairs. Again nothing. Fourth night was a Saturday and I was up super late, and thus was downstairs when I heard my laptop say your virus definitions have been updated. Apparently I'd gotten the Avast update that enabled voice reporting by default and randomized between a male and female voice. Turned that crap off right quick. I've only ever heard the female voice. Still scary as heck though. Fall asleep at the computer. Wake up to her computer be screaming Avast. Virus database has been updated. I was house sitting for friends and I heard their dog bark at like 4 o'clock in the morning. He always barks at passing cars, so I told him to shush and settled back down to go to sleep. Then I heard voices inside the house. I freaked the frick out, shouting, "Who is that? Who the frick is there?" Luckily it was my friends coming back earlier than they thought they would. The loud sound of breaking glass from downstairs. Husband armed himself and crept downstairs. No intruder. One of the cats knocked over a centerpiece that exploded all over the floor. The clear and obvious sounds of an animal in the bedroom. We had no pets. I'm in the UK, so my sleepy brain at first thought it was a rat, or several rats fighting for their lives. After some minor panicking, it turned out to be a pigeon trapped behind the boarded up fireplace. Slept on the sofa that night. It was a rat fight club. A mortar alarm while sleeping in a tent in Afghanistan. You have about 30 seconds to get out of bed, get fully dressed, get all your gear and weapon, and get the frick outside. Pretty crappy, especially when you had been up for over 24 hours straight and you get an hour of sleep before being violently woken up. Surprised I had to scroll down this far to find a mention of an IDF alarm. I still hear that crap in my dreams. My daughter had a ring around the Rosie doll when she was little. You put the doll's hands together and it would sing the song. Anyway, she left it out outside one night apparently, and the dew in the grass shorted it out. I woke up in the middle of the night to this faint ring around the Rosie song playing over and over. It was creepy, and we didn't have an outdoor light in the backyard, so I had to go by myself with a flashlight and search the yard for this creepy doll. I had a Siamese mixed cat, and one summer it started to sing in the middle of the night. Sounded like a crying baby right in my condo. Freaked me the heck out the first time I heard it. Sounds like my stepmom's cat, Tuxedo Cat, that at night would walk around the house meowing, but it sounded exactly like he was saying hello. Hearing the door creak open and that hello is still one of the scariest things I've experienced. Woke up to the feeling of something on my face. Tried to brush it off and in my half asleep state thought it was attacking me. Cue absolute freak out because something is crawling all over me and I can't get it off. Just for me to find out it was my own hand that had gone numb while I was asleep. The numb hand strikes again. My neighbors on the east side yelling at me to wake up and get out of my house. The garage on the west side was burning and there was a car inside. They were sure it was going to blow up. When I was young-ish, I woke up to the sound of people quietly moving around downstairs when I believed I was home alone. Crapping myself and still confused from the sleep, I grabbed a telescopic wheel brace as the only available weapon. Heart beating out my chest. Fight or flight reflex in full effect when I heard the sound of footsteps up the stairs outside my room. Hand on the door handle and ready to fight for my life. I hear my dad's voice. Immediately realize my parents had got back from holiday earlier than I expected. The endorphin rush was intense. Extreme endorphin rush followed by a whole lot of nothing actually can cause damage to your heart over years. We had a training class at work explaining that after a few years all of our hearts are bruised and we need to take steps to lessen our stress and love healthier lives. We have a window AC unit basically right above our bed. One night, ice must have gotten built up inside, and it fell onto the fan that blows the air out. I remember hearing a loud bang and then being sprayed in the face by liquid. My first thought was that someone broke in and shot my wife and I got covered in blood. Freaking terrifying. One time when my brother was living with my sister, he got home drunk and had locked himself out of the house. The only way to break in was to push in my sister's window AC in her bedroom. She woke up to him trying to shove it through the window and yelled that she had a gun, which he did. My dumbass brother almost got himself shot by his own sister. An earthquake. But you see, I'm no California dweller who would half expect to die in the night on any given evening thanks to unforgiving geological processes. No, I'm in England, and an earthquake was a novel experience for me. I thought a train was approaching my house and even awoke, braced for impact. I was utterly terrified afterwards, as I'd taken the ground's solidity and reliability for granted. I got woken up by an earthquake once. I didn't know what it was though and only heard the familiar sound of bed springs squeaking in my neighbor's apartment, so I assumed they were at it again. When my bed started shaking too, all I could groggily think was, Jesus, he's really pounding her this morning. Felt like an idiot when I got the alert on my phone. Heard a sound like low thunder or a big truck coming down the street. Next thing I know, whole house starts shaking. 4 point something earthquake. Not your average occurrence for St. Louis, MO. Fell asleep on the couch. Woke up around 3 AM to my cat clawing my face. Every time I tried to go back to sleep, he started again. Finally I got pee off and decided to put him in another room. As soon as I stood up I smelled natural gas. The pilot light on my stove had gone out. Little guy saved my life. Our cat woke us up when the apartment was on fire. The smoke alarms never went off, and if not for him we probably would have died. My heart racing so fast, I couldn't breathe. I was in the middle of a supraventricular tachycardia episode. My BPM was 210. Had to go to the ER and get drugs to slow it down. I was absolutely terrified I was going to have a heart attack that night. Scary stuff. Holy crap, I've had tachycardia but never like that. I'd be terrified. Hope things are better now. When I was about 12 I got woken up by a middle of the night phone call which I heard my mom answer. She was told my sister had been in a car accident. It was a bad wreck and one of her friends was killed. Luckily my sister made it, but I will never forget the sounds of my mom screaming and crying as her and my dad left for the hospital. I woke up to a bright orange window thinking it was just something strange or that I was just dreaming. Went back to sleep. Woke up again some time later in realization and ran to tell my mother. The neighbor's shed was on fire and our fence and cherry tree were catching fire as well. Still remember standing in the middle of the night looking at the fire and all the ash falling. The neighbors got a cool looking rebuilt shed now. A SWAT team banging on my door responding to hostage situation called in from a cell phone mistakenly registered to my home. The new 911 database apparently had some issues with area codes. They were expecting a knife-wielding assailant and instead got me in my robe. I opened the door to 6 assault rifles trained on me. I'm very thankful their trigger discipline was good, even when I shouted in alarm. The flip side is that someone else was having an even worse night when their 911 call that had to be automatically traced because they couldn't talk to the dispatcher failed to result in the needed response. This is my favorite story to tell. I'm absolutely terrified of a home invasion type of situation. I'll blame it on the copious amounts of true crime podcasts I listen to. So, when I'm home alone I constantly check the locks and sleep with a knife next to my bed. Husband goes out of town for 2 nights. First night all is good. Second night I check the doors, lock my bedroom door and go to sleep. Well, I wake up at around 3 AM to the sound of the door rattling a bit. My first instinct is that it's one of the cats pawing at the door wanting out. But after I've fully woken up I realize it's someone trying to twist the doorknob. I completely freeze. Heart is racing, and I slowly reach for the light switch. I then start to think that maybe I don't want them to know I'm awake by turning the light on, so that maybe I can hide or grab my knife. Our indoor doorknobs, if you twist them hard enough, will just pop open. So I finally hear it click and the door just barely opens about 5 inches. I can see the outline of a man standing there just barely lit from behind from moonlight coming in the living room sliding door. So I'm just sitting there in this frozen position with my arm halfway reaching for the light and the other half reaching for the knife for what feels like an eternity. He just stands there, staring in the door, and I'm convinced I'm about to be murdered. And then the door opens a little bit more, and the man's outline starts to become more clear. I manage to just barely whisper my husband's name, and hear back, "Yeah, why is the door locked, this butthole?" Had decided that the friend he was sharing a hotel with was snoring too loud and drove home 4 hours in the middle of the night. I once woke up from a nightmare and was still half asleep. Thought I saw some kind of a person sitting at the corner of my bed and I wasn't able to move or scream, because still half asleep at that point. When I finally was awake enough to move I tried to smash that person and then realized I still was dreaming. Tried to get asleep after this happened but wasn't able to because of the adrenaline I received. I think this was my worst night and most scariest thing. I ever woke up at the middle of the night. I had stumbled downstairs to get some water from the tap at about 2 AM. I look out of the window directly in front of me and stare into pitch darkness. You can't see anything more than a few feet. Turn the tap off. Look up and there's a dude's face just staring back at me. He's so close he's practically got his nose to the glass. A face that makes Gollum look like a model. This guy is obviously a serial killer. At least that's what my sleep-addled mind was thinking. I crap myself and just keep staring. He is also crapping himself and keeps staring. Until he starts pointing. He is pointing at the outside tap. He's pointing at the outside tap because he's a homeless dude who is getting water for himself and his friends who have started living in the woods nearby. He smiles at me, this black-toothed grin, so I smile back and nod. He fills his water bottles and buggers off back to the woods. Over the next few months I got to know them all and they were super nice. They'd come for water and I'd leave them little care packages of food until they moved on to somewhere else, presumably to scare the crap out of someone else in the middle of the night. TLDR. Went to get water. A madman's face appears at the window out of the darkness. Turns out he's a homeless guy after water and not a murderer. So starts a beautiful, but brief, relationship. I was fully expecting it to be your reflection. When my daughter was an infant we had one of those heart monitors on her foot at night. Apparently the thing will occasionally throw a false red alert alarm, randomly, even though nothing is wrong. It happened twice. You go from full REM, dead to the world sleep to adrenaline pumping, flight or fight response in 05 seconds. I do not recommend it. About a year ago I was woken up at 4:30 AM by someone walking into my apartment. I live alone. Oddly, after the first split-second WTF startle, I wasn't at all scared. I guess I just sensed there was no danger. Turned out to be the wasted hookup of the guy in the apartment downstairs from me. She had taken his keys to go out for a smoke, then forgotten what floor he lived on. And my cheap landlord had reused a matching set of front and back door locks on 2 separate apartments, so they had the same key. She was so disoriented and way more freaked out than I was. I ended up escorting her to the right apartment, and then she asked me for a hug. I have a new lock now. Then there was the time I woke up to the sound and shockwaves of a bomb blast destroying a nearby abortion clinic, but that's a different story. That different story please. I have an electronic door lock. Late one night, I heard the beeps from the lock over and over and over. 4 beeps every time. I grabbed my phone and checked ring.com. No one there. I went out on my balcony and the beeping continued. I finally pinpointed it. Effing Mockingbird learned my lock tones and scared the crap out of me. Had a Mockingbird in my yard that learned to make the sound of my obnoxious late 70s era GE alarm clock. Wouldn't be so bad if the bastard didn't do it an hour before I wanted to get up all the time. My wife punched me in the goods while I was sound asleep. When I woke up screaming she woke up too and was unsure why I was hysterical. She said she was fighting someone in a dream. After my son was born, my fatherly instincts kicked into overdrive. One uncharacteristically quiet night, I heard someone trying to break into our house. Without a word I jumped out of bed, ran out the bedroom, like the ultimate warrior, down the hall, past the kitchen, through the living room, to the front door. I burst through the front door to find our neighbors had ordered a pizza. I woke up to someone whistling a really sad tune outside. At first it was distant, but it got louder as it came closer and eventually stopped right under my bedroom window. The person stayed there for at least 10 minutes and I was scared shitless. I didn't dare peek through the blinds. The next morning I checked the yard. Sure enough, there were footprints in the dirt under my window. I never figured it out and I don't really want to. This is terrifyingly unnerving. My cat giving birth on the corner of my bed. Apparently 100 other people have had this happen. Who knew having cats as pets was so common? My sister woke up in the middle of the night to her cat giving birth on top of her. Freshman year in college, the room next to me had some serious sexual Olympics going on. Said Olympics were interrupted by an angry boyfriend kicking the door in. He proceeded to beat the crap out of both of them. Her screams were something I will never forget. You would think I would have gone and tried to stop him from attacking them, but I just froze and listened. The 3 responses are flight, fight and freeze. It's okay to freeze up. It happens to a lot of people. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.